All right, hello and welcome back. Apologies to cut that break a little short, but again, these will be recorded. So if you do need to step away, feel free to do so, and you can always catch what you missed later. I hope you, got around to shake things out and are now ready for our exciting session 3, which is youth development and cycling. And in this session, we will learn about different opportunities to engage youth in cycling, successes, gaps and opportunities, and lessons for supporting youth. Our first speaker is going to be Sean Wilson, Professor Sean Wilson, who is an associate professor at the Center for Perinatal Biology at Loma University School of Medicine. There, he studies the impact of environmental stress on growth and development. He's also the founder and president of the Youth Cycling Association and GS Andiamo Junior Cycling. And through the Youth Cycling Association, he has led focus group sessions with many of the top cycling coaches in the United States to critically examine the status of the sport in the United States. And Sean will be speaking on cycling as an American lifestyle. After Sean, we will hear from David Taylor and Kori Gamble from the Momentum Bike Clubs. David is the founder and program director of Momentum Bike Clubs, an initiative of Clemson University's Parks, Recreation, Tourism, and Management Department. Kori Gamble is a recent graduate of Legacy Early College and will enter university this fall. She has been an active participant in Momentum Bike Clubs for 7 years. David and Kori will be speaking on their research on supporting students through adventures on two wheels. And following David and Kori's presentation, we'll hear from Dr. Thomas Clanton, recently defended his PhD, congrats, from Clemson University. He will be presenting on bicycling as a positive youth development mechanism. And finally, our final speakers of session 3 will be Mike McGarry and Melissa Davies from NICA. Mike McGarry is NICA's senior coach licensing manager, and Melissa is NICA's adventure coordinator. As a reminder, you can ask questions to presenters through the Whova app. And if they do not have time to answer your question during the session, they can still answer the question afterwards. So feel free to continue to engage via the app. And with that, I will present our first speaker during this session, Dr. Sean Wilson.
All right, thank you, Esther, for having us on and presenting our work from those networking sessions that we held as an opportunity during COVID. And this is really titled Cycling as American Lifestyle, and it represents a culture shift for our sport. I mean, we've heard a lot of really good information today already about how you can introduce cycling as a lifestyle, and clearly it doesn't exist in that way in our country right now, so we're looking forward to moving beyond that. We are an Outride recipient with GS Andiamo Junior Cycling, so I just want to get that out there. And I do serve the sport through a variety of different mechanisms, from the local areas all the way up through serving on road sport committee for USA Cycling. And the Youth Cycling Association is really an outgrowth of just the opportunities I've had to network with coaches around the nation. And this work is really an outgrowth of that. So next slide, please. So, we've heard a lot about global activities, and really now we're looking at, as local coaches, what do we do in those local environments that we can now extrapolate into that national environment? And so we held these through the Youth Cycling Association, all these various networking sessions. So next slide. And I really want to thank the working group. It's a very large working group from around the nation. We've had some international partners. Some of these people may actually be on the call today, and I really want to thank them for their work on this project. This is a community-wide endeavor. We're bringing together the passion and knowledge of all the coaches to talk about our various processes with an eye towards sustainable and scalable types of activities that we can roll out at a national level. Next slide. We used the long-term athlete development models as our guidepost for putting together this material, and it really allowed us to go and examine each level of development and look at the athletes and how they progress through the sport. So next slide, please. One of the fundamental things that we came out with, and we've already talked a lot about this, is you need 3 basic components. One being those infrastructure components that we just heard a lot about, and then you have the accessibility to that infrastructure, including access to bicycles. And what we really focused on was just that programming piece. How do we provide programming or coaching for the athletes and help them move through the sport so that they learn and grow and have fun. So next slide. One of the things that came out of these conversations is that, and we all know this, is that our ecosystem for the sport of cycling is huge. It's very diverse. Shannon really touched on some of and highlighted some of the really positive aspects if you start at the ground floor and bring the sport up. But when we look at our sport in a holistic way, next slide, please, is that the groups tend to silo themselves off, and they silo themselves off in ways where it actually limits the ability for people to move between the different silos and learn and grow and have fun throughout the sport of cycling. And this really hampers us at the national level. Next slide, please. So when we start over on the left-hand side of this slide and work across looking at the riders on bicycles, those are the different developmental stages. And you have to think about this as a very progressive and continuous process. And if you have breakpoints along that process, people will actually leave the sport. And that's not good for us as a sport. They'll go do something else instead. That's fun. So next slide, please. And we just broke this out into three basic components. One being introduction to the sport or discovery phase. The second part being, riding for a purpose. And then the third part being persistent in the sport. People like myself that have been around for a long time, and most of those on the call, whether you're racing at the world tour level, the Olympic level, or whether you're just riding for fun and lifestyle. All right, so next slide, please. So I'm just using my son here as an example. How did we get him from the point in which he was just riding his bike around in the kitchen to having fun riding bicycles outside, to then being at the top end of the sport in the United States and being able to travel around the globe by himself and race bicycles and have fun. And it was a planned and purposeful type of activity. We've built out these processes to help riders like him move all the way through the sport. So when we look across our sport, there's actually a wide range of different programs that exist here in the United States. And this just illustrates the kind of the diversity in that. From the left-hand side, we have things like Ride for Focus, which are introductory or discovery level programming, all the way over to the right-hand side, and we'll hear from NICA in a little bit. And we work with USA Cycling programs, which is that competitive basis. And you need things along that entire continuum. So next slide. What we identified is that in order to really make maximum advantage of this, we need a robust substructure, especially given all the different silos that we have available to us across that continuum. So next slide. So what we find is that this substructure is highly diverse, ranging from going into schools like the Ride for Focus program. We have parks and recreation programs that we're going to hear about in a few minutes. And then we have our traditional cycling clubs, which really is the heart of what we have in the United States or had. And then we also have team-based structure, which is kind of over on that far right-hand side of the spectrum. So next slide. One of the things that we really identified was those cycling clubs act as local community centers, which bring together knowledge about the sport and really provide that social structure that we need in order to learn and grow in the sport. And, so to go to the next slide. One of the things that we really isolated and keyed in on is that there's been an erosion of that club-based structure here in the United States over a long period of time. And I started in the late 1970s, and that's about when the erosion started. But it's not just a simple erosion, it's actually a transfer of knowledge over to the team-based structure. And so now what it's left us is we have a divide between introduction to sport and team-based structure, and we have kind of a dearth in the middle section. So go ahead to the next slide. So in order to rebuild this process, what we need to do, and this is what we identified as a group, is that we need to have a robust rider curriculum and coaching curriculum that now covers the various activities and can be used by those different silos to now not only introduce the riders to cycling, but be able to help them progress and have fun across the entire program throughout their lifespans. Let's go to the next slide. So, as a researcher, I'm always interested in data. So we wanted to know, do purpose-built programs actually have an impact? So go to the next slide. And what we did is we just did a case study approach looking at USA cycling organizations. I had access to the data. It made it very easy for us. So we compared Durango Devo, which is a very good program, to the Davis Bike Club, which is where I started. So Durango Devo being a purpose-built program, and Davis Bike Club being a traditional cycling club with a long history. Go to the next slide. So we just compared the number of USA Cycling licenses, memberships, over a variety of years from about 2005 onwards. And what you see is that the total number of riders doesn't really change much in Durango. But then if we look at go to the next slide. So if we look at the junior ridership, the youth ridership, is that we see that Durango Devo is having an impact. We've seen a 5-fold increase in the ridership. It's just a slow, steady, incremental increase over time. So go to the next slide. If we go to the Davis Bike Club, what we actually see is that in Davis, California, where they don't have any junior programming, is that there's no change in the activities for junior cyclists because there is nothing for them to do. And I should say that in Davis, every kid rides a bicycle to school. So they aren't moving across the equation from discovery and kind of riding the bike for basic commuting all the way over to the far right-hand side of the equation. And it's because there's nothing for them to do. So go to the next slide. So what comes next? How do we attack this problem in a holistic way? So go to the next slide. We need to develop that substructure. And this is not an easy task. I mean, we're talking about a 10-year project. And so we need to take the best practice methods that we all have, and a lot of people are commenting about those today. And then we need to apply objective assessment models, and we've already heard about some of those objective models today. And then that generates evidence-based approaches that we can then roll out at a national level. But these need to be these have to have modular structure that are both scalable and sustainable, that actually generate local community solutions that have to be customized to those local communities. Because clearly Laramie, Wyoming is not the same as Redlands, California, which is not the same as Morgan Hill. They have all unique environments that have to be dealt with in unique ways. But this needs to be done in an integrative and collaborative way. And this is why, having partners such as Outride is so critical, is that we need organizational partnerships that can bring us all together and allow us to network and generate those integrative and collaborative solutions. Go ahead to the next slide. So what are the outcomes if we do this properly at the national level for the United States? So go to the next slide. I mean, ultimately, we're talking about more kids on bikes, and we've been talking about that for years. But when we look at this, is that we're talking about reaching all of the kids in the United States, which is 36 million kids between the ages of 4 and 12. 80% of those between the ages of 13 and 16 are going to move up the ladder. So they actually start using the bike for an active lifestyle just in general. That's 19 million kids. And then those that embrace the lifestyle and really take this on for their lifetime, we're talking about 2 million kids. And we're not even getting to the competition yet. Now, when you get to competitive cyclists, we figure that we're only going to capture 1% of the total, or 200,000 kids between the ages of 13 and 18. These are people who are going to end up like myself, who are still around in the sport for 30, 40 years. I mean, so you're going to have 200,000 kids from 13 to 18, and that happens year over year. So let's go on to the broader impacts. So let's go next slide. When we do this properly, what we're going to do is we're going to enhance the accessibility of the sport, both at the grassroots level, and this will expand out to the national level, which is going to maximize engagement with new ridership and then provide opportunities for them to learn and grow or retain them in the sport for long periods of time. And this is going to overall improve health and wellness, which is really what I'm interested in as a researcher. But it's also going to elevate us in terms of public standing. So Shannon talked about how that you're not moving forward in terms of being a sport beyond just what you see for like chess, or in our case, we're more about like the level of tiddlywinks in the United States, is that we can move far beyond that and actually have us be a real sport on par with things like soccer and all the other ball sports. All right, next slide, please. So ultimately, from the Youth Cycling Association standpoint, is that we're here as a networking organization, and we want to engage with everybody that's involved in these different spaces so that we can learn and grow together. So we're part of that operational organization. You can find more information about us on the Junior Cycling Network, which is our YouTube channel, and you can reach out to me directly at my Loma Linda address. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sean. That was a great overview, and we've got a number of questions coming in. And we're right on time. So our first question that's come in is from an international school educator who would like to do an extracurricular activity for middle and high school students based around cycling. What might some recommendations for beginning steps be to take in starting something like that?
What we always start with is safety. And so a lot of our programs now, I'm talking as putting on my hat as GS Andiamo, is we think about safety, and we're a road-based program. And so we start the kids off on playground-based activities just to get them safe in terms of just general riding, and ensure that they can transfer out onto the streets with traffic. And then we move them through low traffic environments and then move them to higher traffic environments. Clearly, we're a suburban area, we're not urban, so that makes a huge difference. And then, from our standpoint in the United States, we have huge liability concerns. And so we always make sure that we have proper insurance and all that jazz lined up. And then the other part is ensuring that you have adequate coaching and, basically skilled staff. And Shannon really touched on this, that, that can become a huge issue and a huge barrier to ensuring that you have proper programming. Throughout the network, and this is the whole thing about having the network, is that we have direct access to a variety of different people that already work in these spaces, and we can easily connect you up with somebody that has the correct information that you need, whether it be mountain biking, road cycling, like what we do, or going into gravel or cyclocross and things like that. We cover kind of all those bases.
Great. We have another one that's come in. So given the differential participation in racing between genders, what are some ways this is being taken into consideration in the structure of cycling development in the US to increase numbers of female and female identifying individuals in the sport?
I think, NICA is doing some phenomenal work in this space, and maybe they can touch on this when they talk about that. From the USA cycling space, a couple of entities are maneuvering down those pathways, and I don't think that they're on the call today, but Star Track has some great initiatives for their velodrome programming on the East Coast. But it's definitely an issue. From a national perspective, only about 10% of 10% of the ridership from juniors is female, and it's a massive issue. I know that you're doing much better in NICA than they're doing in USA Cycling.
Okay, thank you. Another one that's come in is kind of given the structure that you presented, do you ever worry that the push towards competition, which is much more strenuous, dangerous, and gear intensive, might discourage youth from taking up cycling in its more fun and utilitarian forms?
A great question. That's exactly what we think, is that there's too heavy of a push too early in the developmental phases into the competition end of the spectrum, and that's why it's kind of in a linear format, is that you want people to move through sequentially through the different components, and really what's happening in our sport is because of that dearth kind of in that middle space, is that kids are moving from an introductory phase all the way over to competition, and they're missing out on the fun. Is the bottom line. And if you talk to most professional riders that are my age, and those even that are a little younger, is that we all got into it for fun, freedom, excitement, escape, all those general words. It had nothing to do with competition. The competition was just because we were good at it.
Great, yeah. So call to action for more of those kind of fun-based programs across the US, right?
Right, thank you.
One more question, and this one is more general, maybe more practical, is, maybe with your background and kind of in lifestyle medicine, what might be some of the preferred ways to measure, impact on, physical health and potentially even mental health in youth development with cycling?
Thank you, Esther, for that question. That one's great. I am actively working with Esther with some of the data sets that she's generating. And my goal is to work on stress biology and looking at those impacts. But, clearly you can start with some of the survey-based data, which is where we're starting to try to gain insight into, stress, anxiety, and things like that. And from my standpoint of stress biology is now we can move more into biological measures. You can use some general things like heart rate, which gives you instantaneous information. And then, we heard from the information from Stanford basically being able to look at those instantaneous measurements in real time, brain activity and things like that. But getting more into stress biology is you got to start doing blood draws and getting biological samples. And that becomes a lot more work in terms of working, especially with, youth populations and things like that. But that's where we're headed, is to, gaining insights through using metabolomic profiling, proteomic profiling, and markers of stress biology.
Great.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. We're out of time for questions, but sure there's lively conversations happening on with people sharing ideas. So if you log on Whova, I'm sure you'll have some follow-up there. And with that, we are going to move on to our next speakers, who are David Taylor and Kori Gamble from Momentum Bike Clubs. So take it away.
Esther, it's so good to be with you today. Thanks so much. Thrilled to be here. I'm the director and founder of Momentum Bike Clubs, and we were launched in 2010 with the opening of a Rails to Trails in our community, and just saw that as a great resource. And so we see bikes as a medium for positive youth development. So this asset-based approach for supporting youth. And so we serve under-resourced students and under-resourced communities, and they have all the talent and potential in the world. They just may lack in support or opportunities. And so we want to close that gap. You can see we've had lots of adventures over 11 years, and we are funded by both local healthcare system and local foundations, including our local United Way. Next slide, please. Here are our goals, and I really want to focus on improving physical, mental, and technical bike riding ability. So we want to help middle and high school students get stronger, get more resilient, and that is when the legs are screaming, quit, quit, you get the resiliency, the mental fortitude to say, no, I'm going to get up this hill. I'm not going to stop. When the lungs are hurting, you push through it. And so that sense of resiliency, and also technical, that will get smarter on the bike, that will be in the right gear for the right terrain. And the combination of those three can have dramatic impact on student riders. So we also want to say, what are your life dreams? And we want to put tools and skills in the pockets of our students so that they can chase those dreams, and also referral services to families. Next slide, please. So our entry-level clubs are our middle school clubs, and that will be 10 to 12 students supported by 3 to 4 or 5 mentors, riding one afternoon per week for a couple of hours, exploring the world, having fun on a bike, building relationship. We say that there's only one thing more fun than riding a bike. It's riding a bike with friends. And I just don't go out on a lot of solo rides, but when a friend calls and said, let's go out, I go out. And so that it proves so true with Momentum. Next slide, please. So we have a number of opportunities for Momentum, and we've just concluded our 2021 summer internship. That includes whitewater rafting. It might be a poetry slam. It might be people of color speaking to our students, a community project. Then those students can move to our high school challenge team, which is more advanced road cycling. They have the opportunity to ride with clip-ins, to do longer rides, to do charity rides. And so there's some real neat opportunities to advance their cycling skills and potential. Next slide. For challenge team, we offer youth development seminars, and we always have good food, good healthy food. Maybe we'll have a BIPOC speaker that will talk about their life experience and how they overcame their challenges. And so many of our students can see in these speakers their own journey and some of the challenges they have. And so, and we're real intentional about building community. many of our students and our mentors will say, this is my second family. There's a great sense of belonging. And we also do adventure cycling. So we take trips, we do camping, bike packing, and there's all kind of data that says being out in nature and experiencing the outdoors, that there are just significant benefits for that. So, so we have a active adventure cycling team that in 2019 did the Great Allegheny, and we've also done the Silver Comet in Atlanta, and so we have a great team there. We also have a program I want to do a quick pitch for. It's called Art Circles, and it's BIPOC students and mentors only, using art to process racial trauma and help students find their voice. And we have a team that will be presenting, I believe, in the next segment, so you all can tune into that, and that is a Momentum initiative. So I want to turn it, Esther, real quickly to one of our evaluators, Charles Chancellor, is just going to speak for a quick word about his understanding of momentum and in terms of evaluation. So, Charles.
Yes, thanks, David. And I'm a professor at Clemson University. And in 2020, David and Momentum joined Clemson University Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management program, which I'm a professor in. And this has really increased our ability and strengthened our ability to collaborate. And our collaboration currently is primarily through evaluation, and it's also by having a dedicated graduate student as part of working with David, funded through Momentum, by the way. We're able to really more tightly connect with Momentum and do some things. And although we're in the early design process of this kind of comprehensive evaluation program, shortly, the next presentation will be by my colleague, Thomas Clanton, and that will highlight some of the evaluation, some of the early evaluation work that we have been able to do as a collaboration between Clemson and Momentum.
Thanks, Charles. Next slide, please. So each year we give an award called the Momentumus Maximus Award, and it's the student that embodies all the heart, the soul, the resilience, the beauty, the courage that Momentum seeks. And this year's recipient is a beautiful young and brave woman named Kori Gamble, and wanted to give Kori an opportunity to talk about her experience with Momentum, so you can hear her perspective. So I'll turn it over to Kori at this point. Kori, welcome.
Hi, Mr. David, and thank you all so much for giving me this opportunity. Just kind of get started. I started in 7th grade with Momentum Bike Clubs, and as said earlier, I did graduate from Legacy, and so I did go to our middle school there, and that's when I started. And then just being there, I had never really been a person to ride bikes. I was not an active kid. I was like, okay, I'm gonna sit in front of my TV, I'm gonna play games all day. That was me wholeheartedly. And then when I started with Momentum, I became more active and riding bikes more. And now I'm on a level to where it's like I can do 20 miles in Plantersville and I'm okay. And But 2 years after I started with Momentum, I was given an opportunity to be a part of our summer internship. And there it was called Powered for Life. And we did this amazing program where we had this big opportunity to start, I guess it was like our project. And it was based on our swamp rabbit trails. And just working in that and getting the opportunity to be a voice that was heard, and seeing like the behind the scenes of how Momentum works with students, that was an amazing opportunity. And following the internship, I was given the opportunity to work at a bike shop here in the village in West Greenville, and it's called Village Wrench. And just being a part of that, Momentum really set me up to be able to work on bikes in my community and learn how to teach other people how to ride bikes. And I got to mentor kids. I was mentored. I was a part of that program for 2 years. And then I am now a part of Challenge Team, which I started in the 9th grade, right after I finished the summer internship program. And with Challenge Team, like I said, I am now at the point to where I can do a 20-mile bike ride. And we did a trip to Plantersville where I was given the opportunity to do that first 20-mile bike ride. I had never done long distance before. And it was the family that got me through it. At Momentum, we are a family, and all of our mentors in our youth, we really push each other to get over those challenges, hence the name Challenge Team. And so in Plantersville, we did the 20 miles. We met this amazing group of riders that they have up there. For the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the group, but I definitely wish to do another ride with them because they were a really big part in, just helping me push through that. Because I was so used to doing the same routes all the time. So this was a really big step for me. And following our 20 miles, we all got to, come together at the end and just enjoy reggae music and this, big cookout and this family of people whom I had never met before. And had it not been for, being in Momentum and getting to meet Mr. David and a ton of other amazing mentors, I would have never been given that opportunity. And I was, like Mr. David said before, I was one of the underserved, students. So I wasn't given many opportunities up until the point of where my best friend pulled me aside and was like, we need to do bike club. This is something we have to do. And unfortunately, I was the only one that came out of that let's start. And, I think being in bike club has really showed me, even though you may start in this, large group, there are always different times in people's lives, and you guys will always, find your way through it. And with Challenge Team, I was always given that opportunity to go through those big challenges and those, those big life moments, knowing that I had the second family to help me get through it. And that was a really big thing for me. Because I was always like, the quiet kid. And so having Momentum as my safe place was an amazing thing. And I'm so happy because now they get to see me off to college, and they were there for me from 7th grade to the very end. And I am forever grateful.
Kori is going to an HBCU like next week, so it's very close here. She's going to Clanton University, and we are so proud of her.
Thank you, Mr. David.
All right, well, thank you all for your wonderful presentation. I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. And so for the first question, it can be for, David, Kori, or Charles. So this is from a community youth organization that's focused on BIPOC youth. They're always looking for ways to reach non-traditional cyclists. Do you have any recommendations for successful, outreach and engagement for including youth from traditional non-cycling communities?
So in our fairly affluent town, we have 20% of our population does not have reliable transportation. And so many of those people are using bicycles to get around the community. And so if you go in predominantly African-American or Hispanic communities, there are a lot of people that know how to ride a bike and have bike and love biking. They just don't have the $3,000 bike. So we have, and particularly in our community-based clubs, we developed those networks to say, you'd be a great mentor. You're a bike rider from the community. And so we leverage those kind of relationships to make sure we have a diverse mentor cohort.
Thank you. And this one, maybe it's for both David and Charles. So sorry I missed you, Charles, in the introduction, but this is kind of a unique partnership that I'm sure a lot of organizations are interested to hear more about. being able to capture the impact of their programs with those university partners. Could you tell us some recommendations about, combining, community organizations with, academic researchers to really leverage that partnership?
From our perspective, as at Clemson, we are a research institution, but we also very much pride ourselves on teaching and service. And so we have several organizations within Parks, Rec, and Tourism, like Momentum, that different people do research with. If you're a program like Momentum, I would suggest that you reach out. First, you would probably want to find a university that has a Parks and Rec type department, or perhaps psychology, kinesiology, as we've seen from some other programs today, that may have one of those programs that you think you could that has something of interest to you. So in David's case, he's very interested in recreation and very interested in youth development. Well, we also have a youth development program within our department as well. And so some of the other names you may see on the list for presentations in the next presentation, those folks are youth development specialists. So I would say just reach out to your local community college or your university and just kind of stalk around on the internet and see who may have similar interests.
Great. And this last question before we get on to Thomas is for Kori. So Kori, do you have any recommendations or thoughts for youth and students who might be, a little hesitant to join a bike club, but are curious about the potential impact it could have on their life down the line?
I say go for it. I was really shy growing up, so like I said, my best friend had to push me into it because I was like, okay, I wasn't really into clubs, but I feel like if I had never did Momentum, then there were a lot of other clubs that I probably would have never joined because I would have remained, in that shell. And I can definitely say Mr. David has pushed me to a lot of points of getting out of my shy shell. So I say go for it. Take that leap, take the opportunity. You never know what blessings could come from it.
Great. Well,
Esther, if I could jump in real quickly. One of the things where I pushed Kori is we had a nonprofit conference in Greenville and Momentum was going to be featured. So I asked Kori to speak and I said, oh, it's not that big a deal. Well, she ends up speaking in front of 750 people and just wowed the audience. So, and that was a big step for her and she gained a lot of confidence from that. So I'd say, just encouraging students to take a step, to try it, and then take the pedal on the next stroke, then the next stroke. And before you know it, you've been 20 or 50 miles, or you've spoken in front of 750 people. So Esther, thanks so much.
Great, thank you all. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with Momentum. And with that, we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Thomas Clanton from Clemson University.
Okay, thank you, Esther. What I'm going to present on here is, I know Dr. Chancellor mentioned that Clemson University does a lot of evaluation for NBC. And so what I'm going to present on here is an article from a study that we conducted, interviewing some of the mentors at NBC about the experience of youth in their program. And we were able to publish this article in the Journal of Parks and Recreation Administration. And so we're just going to go over shortly a little bit of the results from that study. And also, before I get started, I kind of just wanted to give a brief overview of what positive youth development means. And so we've been talking a lot about youth development. And when researchers talk about youth development, they normally talk about it from this positive youth development lens. And so this positive youth development lens is a strength-based program planning and delivery approach that's grounded in relational developmental systems meta theory. So that meta theory is composed of developmental principles that emphasize the capacity for human change and plasticity. So for the ability for a youth to be able to change and grow. Positive youth development is also often defined as a developmental process, an approach to programming for youth, and an organizational practice for promoting healthy development of youth. And so the way that NBC approaches the bicycle and the way they interact with youth is helping them develop positively through this kind of intentional process. PYD occurs through positive bidirectional interactions with their environment. So youth are affected by their environments that they interact with, and they in turn impact that environment. And so these positive interactions help them grow. And David mentioned this a little bit, physically, psychologically, and socially, mentally, being able to develop in a holistic manner. And so PYD, the main philosophy they have there is seeing youth as assets to be developed. And so David mentioned that asset-based program model, and rather than problems to be solved. So instead of looking at youth who need to be solved of some sort of problem, it's how do we develop them in some sort of way. And so positive youth development's often measured in a variety of different ways, but two of the common ways are the 5 C's. So do youth develop it in competence and their confidence and their ability to connect with others and their character, and for their ability to care for that community, and do those 5 C's lead to contribution? And so there's a very intentional way to be able to see, is positive youth development occurring in my program? Another way that is is through what we call the Big 3, which is positive and sustained adult-youth relationships, life-building skilled activities, and opportunities for youth contribution and leadership. And this is something that MBC does very well and very intentionally and specifically. For members of under-resourced communities, and so the main population that MBC serves, there can be barriers for the ability to go through a positive PYD process. And so racial identification, socioeconomic status, access to healthy food and physical activity, a family structure, the impact can all impact the developmental process of youth. And so the acknowledgement of these barriers is why PYD programs are established. And so one way that PYD can be effectively contributed is through the mentorship process, which MBC takes the time to very intentionally very specifically do. And so mentoring can often occur in different ways. Sometimes it can happen informally. So you meet another non-parental adult just kind of throughout your daily interactions, and you just have an informal relationship with them. Some other times it can be very intentional, right? Very formalized through a program with the curriculum that addresses life skills, asks youth to reflect on their identity, decision-making, and communication skills in a very formalized way. Well, what makes MBC unique, I feel like, and David mentioned this a little bit, is the group mentor process. And so similar to this one-on-one formal mentoring, group mentoring programs promote positive behavioral, emotional, and academic outcomes by providing activities for youth to develop those. And what makes it unique is that within a group mentoring model, the mentors are also participating in the activity with the youth. And so the youth are not just interacting with one person, but they're interacting within a group of non-parental adults. So through having several interactions with non-parental adults. And so group mentoring really focuses on group cohesion and belonging to a strong group identity. So establishing that strong group identity. And so really this study looked to see, how does the bike act as a mechanism for positive youth development, right? And so when you're on a bicycle, bicycle is that constant bidirectional interaction between an individual and their environment. The riders are agents of their own development. They can choose where to go. They can choose how they utilize the bike. They must constantly act upon and react to the bike, the riding surface, their general surroundings. They have to constantly be aware of their environment and as well as the other people that they're interacting with. And so the bicycle provides youth with these opportunities to make contributions, to provide leadership, to build relationships, to go out and exercise, and to learn this skill and to develop. And so to conduct our research, and I guess we can go to the next slide. We did focus groups with 4 Momentum Bike Club mentor focus groups. There were about 4 to 6 mentors in these focus groups. And the data was collected for a variety of different reasons. They talked about the program model and structure of MBC, what were the characteristics of the youth, what were the characteristics of the mentors, what was part of MBC, what are the positives, I guess, of MBC, what did they do well, and what are some of the barriers that they needed to addressed. And so this is all part of the evaluation process. NBC, through these focus groups, received a technical report kind of describing what occurred within these focus groups. But for this study, we looked at how youth mentioned that the youth benefit, or how mentors mentioned that youth benefited specifically from the bicycle. And so we can go to the next slide. Three primary themes emerged from the data that we examined, with three primary sub-themes for each of those themes. Youth learned responsibility, self-confidence, and improved health from interacting with the Momentum Bike Club, and specifically with the bicycle. And so the responsibility that youth have, they're responsible for their equipment. And one of the mentors said that the youth take pride in having their bicycle and being able to fix it and maintain it. They even noticed that if they didn't know how to fix it perfectly, they still tried. They had this item that they had to take responsibility for. They also had responsibility for their riding group. Biking safely in a group is a skill that requires technical proficiency. You have to know what you're doing. You have to understand the terrain. You have to understand the rules of the road. And youth, once they learn this, they learn to take responsibility for the others, people within their group. And they learn more responsibility to their community. So bicycling, compared to other modes of transportation, is a little bit slower paced. Allows individuals to say, oh, look over there, look what we're interacting with. Look, oh, I didn't know this was in my community. One mentor said that youth don't usually take much ownership in protecting trails that they never use, but they take ownership. They don't take ownership in the ocean if they never swim in it. There's all these studies that show that exposure to these places creates a sense of ownership. So as they're exposed, they take responsibility for their program. They also develop self-confidence in their ability to master bicycling. As their physical accomplishments improve, they're able to grow, and they're able to be more confident in their ability to succeed harder and harder rides. They experience more freedom. One mentor pointed out that bicycling allowed youth to access areas outside of their normal surroundings, which provided a sense of freedom and independence. And again, they were able to be more confident within their community because they were able to see more of their community. So the bike opened up Greenville. It opens up Greenville in a way that you can go fast on it. You can have fun, but you can also go far. We've got kids who don't necessarily get out in their community. It's like you've taken a real big world of Greenville and you've made it accessible to them. And finally, bicycling helps youth improve their health. Of course, we know this, physical health. They're able to bike. It's also a lifelong skill. Youth are able to bike throughout their lives. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a team activity. It doesn't have to be something you do with somebody else. You can do it on your own. And it also helps with mental health. One mentor said they see a youth riding on a bike and they're like, oh my God, it feels so good. It's so refreshing. It's so freeing. They see a lot of the kids experience that throughout their bike riding. And so from those primary findings, we have some management implications. So we can go to the next slide. The bicycling fosters mentorship. Mentors interact within the bicycling activity. They encourage each other. There's mutual encouragement. Hey, we can get up top of this tall mountain. You can do it, and I can do it. There's that mutual interaction. It allows mentors to share their experience and role model behavior. So how do I keep going when things are looking rough? How do I keep going when it's a hot day? It also allows youth to be able to be more mobile throughout their community. Allows them to be able to access their community in ways that they're not normally able to, kind of get out of their normalized neighborhoods and be able to see a more diverse population. They're able to master a skill. And so the kind of this positive youth development idea of once they gain this confidence, they gain confidence in their ability to do so. And then they're able to connect with other people, connect with their community, and really feel empowered in who they are. And this empowerment idea is that the bicycle provides this confidence and provides this ability to be able to grow and interact with the community, engage with the community, and also allows a youth to establish an identity. And within that identity, they can understand who they are. And the bicycle and the program, NBC, empowers youth to be able to live strongly within that identity. So let's go to the next slide. There are some limitations to implementing these programs, which NBC has been able to overcome in some way. But when establishing these programs, some things to think about. It's you have to acquire the bikes, you have to be able to store the bikes, and you have to be able to maintain the bikes. And NBC is also very lucky that they have a 20-mile rail trail within the Greenville area that's very nice and very well maintained. But finding a safe riding location is very important. And also, NBC has done a great job through networking through the community, as David mentioned. And that's helped them be able to acquire bikes, find places to be able to store those bikes, receive the funding that's necessary for all those activities. I know they have partnerships with bike maintenance organizations that help them maintain the bicycle. And so just establishing those connections within the community is very important. And also, mentorship is very important and helpful and can happen within these programs, but biking, it's hard to sit down and talk while you're on a 20-mile bike ride, right? And so when establishing these programs, you need to be intentional about finding mentorship opportunities, stopping, having some more formalized one-on-one or group discussions where you're making sure you're hitting those topics instead of just going through the motions, which NBC does a great job of. So that's just a general overview of what we did within our research. And so I'd be happy to take your questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I will ask a couple of questions that have come up just to keep us on time. And the first one is more of a practical question is, there are preferred ways, or if you have recommendations for organizations trying to measure the impact of youth development, any kind of low-level recommendations you might have for those organizations.
Yeah, I would just say the positive youth development framework is very much out there if you look it up. Understanding what that is, the kind of asset-based mentality. And so there are validated scales out there if you want to do some evaluation on your own where you're handing out surveys. I looked up a few before we started. There's this very short form PYD, which is like 17 questions, which you can find online by Googling that, or a new scale that measures the big three. From a study that's done in 2020. So you could Google those, but more specifically, just looking and interviewing your youth, talking to your youth and saying, hey, are they increasing in confidence? Are they increasing in their competency and their ability to do the bicycle? Are they increasing in their way that they contribute to the community? So once you understand what youth development is, what does it look like to actually develop positively, it's easier to kind of be able to measure that.
Great, and I'll ask one more question. We've noticed a theme coming up about, people having barriers of, multiple different skill levels, and I'm just seeing how that might link into these mentorship opportunities. Did you come across anything in your research that shows, having some of the more experienced students being able to mentor and coach the newer or less skilled students? Does that help with kind of building confidence for those coming in new to the bike?
Yes, and it helps establish confidence for those mentors. And so getting to that second level of mentorship where your youth is mentoring another youth, that is kind of the gold standard of what you want from a positive youth development program. And so that helps the beginning youth say, okay, well, I understand that this friend of mine, maybe a little bit older, has advanced in some sort of way. They're showing me how to do it. They're a peer, and so it's maybe a little less intimidating to interact with that person than interacting with an adult. But it also gives that youth who's doing the mentoring the confidence, yeah, I can teach, I can grow, I can influence somebody else. I think Kori was talking about that. She was talking about, hey, I was able to go back and do mentoring as I kind of continue to grow and progress. And so the research that's out there on mentorship that says if you can do youth on youth mentoring, that is really going to impact your program in a positive way.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. And again, there are all sorts of more questions coming in, so feel free to log on to Huba and we can send you the questions afterwards and share some of these resources you've discussed. So thanks again.
Thank you, Esther.
And with that, we will pass it on to our last presenters of this session. So Mike and Melissa from NICA, take it away.
Awesome, thanks, Esther. We wanted to send a huge thank you to you, Esther, and then we'll do a quick introduction. My name, like Esther said, is Melissa Davies. I am the program manager of Adventure for the National Interscholastic Cycling Association. I think it's the raddest title of all titles. My role specifically is to integrate adventure education and experiential education into our coach licensing department. I live in State College, Pennsylvania. Currently, I'm in Michigan visiting family, and I'll pass it to Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. I'm Mike McGarry. I'm the Senior Coach Licensing Manager for NICA, which makes it sound a little bit like I work at the DMV. But essentially what I'm in charge of is coach development and coach education for NICA. Next slide, please, Esther. So by the end of this session, we're really hoping that you all will be able to identify our mission at NICA and our vision, describe how through our research, we're defining character, recall some of our guiding principles on character development in youth sports, and then recognize our coach first approach to character development in youth sports.
Awesome. Go ahead, next slide, Esther. So we wanted to ground you in a little bit of who we are and what we do. So we were founded in 2009 in Northern California, and we started off as a youth racing organization. And as we've evolved and as we've grown, we've really kind of morphed into a youth development organization that uses mountain biking as a tool. So some year-to-date statistics, we currently are in 28 states and have 29 leagues. We've got 12,285 volunteer NICA coaches across all of our leagues, 22,070 student athletes, and we serve youth 6th through 12th grade. Some other cool stats: annual growth rate throughout our organization since 2009 is 43%, slightly skewed. Every year we bring on 2 new leagues, which kind of amplify that growth rate. As a gift of COVID, we didn't bring on any new leagues in 2020, but for existing leagues, our growth rate is typically right around 21% growth for leagues. A few things that we feel separate us. Mike and I really love working for this organization. We are mission and vision driven, but 70% of our volunteer coaches are parents. So we mentioned kind of group mentoring process, and we work really hard to bring our parents into our organization. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we are riding in the woods, and we have recommended ratios of 6 student athletes to 1 coach and or 8 athletes to 2 coaches. So it creates the opportunity, amplifies the opportunity for the group mentoring process and relationship building. On top of small groups, coaches ride with student athletes. They have that shared experience on the trail and an opportunity for that common experience, which is really fantastic. The other really piece that we love about our organization is there is no bench. I first started working for NICA 4 years ago, and my husband and I were reflecting about the greatness and goodness of NICA. And he comes from a very competitive, high-level collegiate soccer background. And he's like, wait, you mean that if someone else comes on the team, the other kids don't lose riding time or playing time? And I was like, exactly. More kids on teams just means more fun for everyone. So we really try to amplify and create opportunities for inclusivity, which is one of our core values. Next slide.
Yeah, so part of our mission, right? Our mission here is that we build strong minds, bodies, character, and community through cycling. And we found that it's easy to identify how to measure and build strong minds, bodies, and community through cycling. There's been a lot of other presentations throughout the day that have talked about these aspects. But the question was, how do you build character, right? How do you measure character development? And how do you develop a program that doesn't impose character on student athletes in a curriculum format? How do we bring students into that? So that was the question, and that's what brought us here.
So here's that question. Next slide, Esther. How do we define character? So as we've grown and evolved, we've created really thoughtful and sophisticated resources and systems, methodologies to support bike safety, to support risk management, coach development, event quality. But we really relied on a broad experience to develop character. So in 2018, we embarked on a journey to carefully consider how to bring more intentional approach to character into our work. So we knew qualitatively that character was happening. We knew from stories from our coaches, and we knew from narratives, just like from Kori's, that it's there and it's existing. And we knew that our culture was already really strong and created a positive force to help kind of elevate that movement forward. So from the onset of the work that we've been doing, our intention has been to better understand what is already present inside our programming that's contributing to character development. What do we got that's already going on? Build our own unique character development practice that reflects our NICA's mission, vision, and core values. And we wanted to create a NICA way to embed character at all levels of our organization. So making sure that there are resources for learning, growth, and support kind of in every single layer of our organization for an entire NICA family. So between 2018 and 2021, we've been working closely with Edgework Consulting to formulate our perspective on how we develop character and to determine how to kind of best talk about it, train to it, and infuse it into our teams and leagues. So we started with this very academic kind of definition of character. Character is the behavioral expression of an individual's beliefs and values. We work with youth and we coach to youth. And so we've landed on kind of framing character in a question. What do you stand for and what do you do about it, to put it into kid language? Next slide.
So through our research, we found three kind of guiding principles on character and character development, right? Firstly, we all possess character, right? It's not something that's absent in a person. It may not be the type of character we hope for in our target population, but we're not working with a blank slate, right? Secondly, character development requires really deliberate practice. It's not something to be attained in a short period of time, and it may be tested at any moment, but true character development is a skill to practice, which takes time to develop. And lastly, character development is an active and dynamic lifelong process. We're always working on it, even if we aren't. And you don't never know when the next time you're going to be tested. Your character may evolve or de-evolve also over your lifetime. Therefore, it's not directly tied to your chronological age or your development in other parts of your life. In other ways, your character is only as strong as your most recent decision that you've made. Meaning that just because our coaches are older than our student athletes doesn't mean that they have more character or more character development than our student athletes. And that was really important for us when thinking about this. Next slide, Esther.
Yeah. So then we get into this really fantastic was how is character developed? We're a youth development organization. We have the layer of coach and student athlete, and we started looking at some research. And there's evidence that sport can have a positive impact on a youth's physical and mental health, their interpersonal skills, discipline, their self-efficacy. However, it doesn't appear that there's evidence support that sport directly shapes youth character. Couldn't find that direct correlation. So we found interscholastic programs are often justified kind of by the assertion that competitive teams build character for participants. There's little evidence support that kind of just mere participation in and of itself leads to positive youth development. In fact, without real great leadership, sports participation may even likely to negatively affect that opportunity. So when filtered through coaches and really great leadership, there was evidence of pro-social development and with the athletes in the care of those coaches. So we found that through that, athletic experience, our student athletes can foster optimal youth development when they have the leadership of a coach in front of them. So we found that coach behavior is really what can often foster optimal youth development. Next slide.
Yeah, so throughout our history as an organization, we've endeavored to preserve and honor the inherent power of mountain biking and the true magic of what happens when we ride and race together, while also bringing an intentionality and a design to our leagues that allow for the greatest impact on body, mind, character, and community, right? So how do we change youth sports? It appears that the key factor in character development in a sports context is not the sport, but the role of the coach, right? So coach training is really important, right? Melissa mentioned earlier, like the number of coaches that we have across the country. We have a really robust coach training program that gives coaches the tools to create really amazing programs for student athletes. We can really if we can impact coach behaviors and adult behaviors in our organization, we can really truly impact character development, not only across the youth that come into our organization, but the adults as well. And that's really the role that we see moving forward. Next slide, please.
So we are really working to provide an opportunity to change lives. And so from the research that we've been able to gather to truly change youth sports, we need to start with the adults and help them identify their own character beyond their own individual character journey so that they can guide their youth down their own individual character journey. So we start with the adults. We start with the coaches as models, and we feel like we have the biggest impact on character development across all NICA programs and youth sports when we start with coach first. Next slide, Esther. Yes, timely, Mike McGarry. So thank you very much for having us here. We'll pass it along to questions.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Mike, for your presentation. We got a number of questions coming through, so I'm kind of sorting through them, and so we'll see what we have time for. But our first is around kind of, pathways and recommendations you might have for increasing access to, students who might not have access to a bike, or, parents who's aren't going to be particularly involved in being able to take them to practice, or even kind of in more kind of city or urban settings. So kind of how might, NICA help to engage and get those youth moving on mountain bikes?
We're both excited.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike, you go first.
So there's a lot wrapped up in that question. I think a lot of our leagues across the country do a good job on trying to identify loaner bikes for student athletes across the country. We've partnered with Trek, and Trek has done a lot of sponsoring for student athletes to not only get student athletes bikes, but equipment and gear to make them feel like they're a part of it. And although we have about 70% of our volunteer coaches are parents, they don't have to be. We get a lot of like enthusiastic coaches that come from just love of bikes. I'm here in Madison, Wisconsin, which has, an urbanish population, but a really good bicycle infrastructure that includes paved greenways and natural surface trails. So the more that we can partner with our local communities to have both of those, right? Not just bike infrastructure and paved greenways, but natural surface trails that really allow student athletes to kind of go out and explore. So partnering with other community organizations is really key there.
I think the other layer that's really important for us in an organization is we do have the culmination of usually 4 to 6 events, depending upon the league, but we don't require any student athlete to race. And so I think there's real depth in our programming because the majority of the time that we have spent is in front of coaches and at practice, which creates that more accessibility. So we don't require our athletes to travel multiple hours to the event. It's at practice where kind of that magic of the bicycle happens, and reinforcing that for our leagues and our coaches and for our parents, because that's where the majority of our time is happening. And I think we saw that as we pivoted through COVID. We continued to grow as an organization because our programming is focused at practice, and we just shifted and offered more adventure-based opportunities. So bringing it to them, I think, is a really important piece. And like Mike said, a lot of layers in making that happen.
Yeah, thank you. And kind of related to that, a great question just came in terms of how do you motivate adults to become active volunteers, since you mentioned that coaches are really the foundation of NICA?
Oh, dang it, Mike, you go. All right.
I think we talked about earlier that the coaches participate with the student athletes. So I think if you can get the adults out to practice, to be a part of it, and they see how much fun they can have being a coach, that they're participating and learning along with it. A lot of our coaches come to us maybe not as mountain bikers, but maybe have a bike, and they through participating in our programs get those mountain biking skills and get that time with young people to grow, and the shared experience that comes from coming out and basically getting free skills coaching and being part of it really excites them and wants them to come back. I've definitely had coaches on my team that have told me they were only going to give me a couple practices a week, or excuse me, a couple practices a month. And that was 7 years ago. And they haven't missed much of a practice in 7 years because it's fun. So we talked about earlier, way back, I think Dr. Wilson talked about making things fun, right? Our core values are fun, inclusivity, equity, respect, and community, right? And fun is number one for a reason, right? Bike should always be fun. So make it fun for the adults as well as the youth. That's how you get adults in.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'll ask one more, but encourage both you and Melissa to jump into the app because there's a lot of great questions coming in for NICA. And the last one is kind of high level. How do you help develop the coach's character, or are there resources there that you provide for training these coaches?
Yeah, I think we are right now in the depths of creating that infrastructure across our organization, making sure that it's scalable, it's approachable, and very intentional. So we have a very nice platform of online education that we provide to our coaches. That's a part of their training. And then we also have leadership opportunities online and in the league. And we're working to kind of scale it across kind of all of those layers and not make it kind of a one-stop shop within that. So it's kind of bled in. We have a very particular kind of language and context that we're working with to hopefully kind of infuse it at all layers, but online education and then in person are kind of the two intentional layers that we're working. But we read you those numbers, and it has to be scalable, and it has to be something that we can kind of replicate across all of our organizations. So we're still in the depths of ensuring that that will be successful.
Great, well, thank you both again. So much excitement and engagement around youth cycling education and programming. So encourage the discussions to keep going, and we're excited to share all of these learnings with our community here. So with that, we will take another break, about 6 minutes. So get up, move around, get some water, and we'll see you back shortly.